Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the system shaping our world one book at a time.
It's really good to be here.
Today we're diving into a text that, I've got to be honest, it really gets under your skin. We're tackling a fundamental systemic question that I think sits at the very bottom of almost every modern anxiety we have.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
The question is this: how do entire societies undergo a structural shift from just using technology as a helpful support tool to treating technology as the absolute unquestionable source of authority and meaning?
It is, I think, the defining question of our age. And what's so unsettling about it, what Postman really zeroes in on, is that this shift isn't usually some kind of violent revolution.
Yeah.
It's a slow, quiet surrender. It happens so gradually you barely notice it.
It's a drift, exactly. And if you just look around right now, in 2026, we are living in a landscape where human judgment is being outsourced on a massive scale.
Oh, absolutely.
We surrender it to quantification, we surrender it to automation, and we surrender it to these expert systems in really important fields, medicine, education, even governance.
We've come to trust the dashboard more than we trust our own eyes.
That's a perfect way to put it. The number on the screen feels more real than the reality in front of us.
And just to frame this for everyone listening, this deep dive is not about your personal gadget addiction.
No.
We are not here to scold you for doom scrolling on TikTok or to get all nostalgic about the good old days when people, churn their own butter.
Absolutely not. This isn't a moral panic episode. This is a deep dive into cultural and institutional systems. We're looking at the architecture of our reality.
The underlying operating system.
Exactly. And to do that, we are analyzing the seminal work by Neil Postman, Technopoly, The Surrender of Culture to Technology.
Postman is. Well, he's essential reading. For those who might not know him, he was a media theorist and a cultural critic, a professor at NYU for most of his career.
And his focus was always on this intersection of technology, culture, and especially education.
Right. He was always asking how our tools, especially our media, impact the symbolic world, how they change the way we think, not just the things we do.
He wrote this book in 1992. Think about that for a second. The public internet barely existed, no smartphones, no social media, and yet reading it now in 2026, it feels like he was a time traveler writing a warning letter to our present.
It's incredibly prescient because he wasn't just reacting to computers. He was identifying a deeper pattern. He was writing at a specific moment when data-driven institutions and this whole idea of expert authority really began to pick traditional forms of wisdom.
He saw the writing on the wall.
He was trying to name a condition, a cultural condition where technical logic becomes sovereign, where it's the highest authority in the land.
And he coined a term for it. Technopoly.
Technopoly is such a brilliant, evocative word.
It sounds like a board game you definitely do not want to play. So let's define it properly. What distinguishes a technopoly from just, a modern high-tech society?
Okay, so this is the most important distinction Postman makes. A technopoly is not just a society that has a lot of advanced technology. It's not about having computers or fiber optics.
It's just not about the stuff.
It's not about the stuff. It's a social system where technology provides the ultimate justification for life. It's a state of culture, a worldview, where things like efficiency, measurement, and exactitude completely replace older values like meaning, wisdom, and historical context.
So it's almost a theological shift, in a way.
That is the perfect way to put it. He argues it is a new kind of religion. In a technopoly, the culture seeks its authorization in technology. It takes its orders from technology. The machine doesn't just serve the culture's goals. The machine becomes the goal.
The how becomes the why.
Precisely. The pursuit of efficiency becomes the ultimate purpose of human enterprise.
And we really have to clarify this because I think people get this wrong about Postman all the time. He isn't a Luddite. He's not standing outside the factory with a sledgehammer ready to smash the looms.
No, not at all. He's very clear that he appreciates antibiotics and central heating as much as the next person.
Yeah.
He's not arguing for a return to some pre-technological past.
So what is he doing then?
He's analyzing a mechanism. He's a systems thinker. He's showing us, step by step, how our tools can end up usurping the very culture that created them. He's looking at the power dynamic between us and our creations.
And to understand that power dynamic, Postman doesn't start with the computer chip or the algorithm. He starts way, way back.
He does. He goes to ancient Egypt with a legend that Plato recounts in the Phaedrus. It's the legend of King Tamus.
Which is, I think, just a beautiful place to start. It sets the stage for the entire argument because it immediately challenges our modern assumption that new, always and automatically equals better.
It introduces the idea of the technological trade-off right from the beginning.
So let's retell the story because it's so important. You have the god Thuth. He's this brilliant inventor. He's basically the Silicon Valley CTO of the ancient world. He invents numbers, calculation, geometry, astronomy, and most importantly, writing.
Tooth is very, very proud of himself. He has an impressive portfolio of disruptive innovations.
And he brings these inventions to the king of Egypt, Themos. Thuth, acting as the pitchman, shows off the art of writing and says, "Here is an accomplishment, my lord the king, which will improve both the wisdom and the memory of the Egyptians. I have discovered a sure receipt for memory and wisdom."
So Thuth is the archetypal technophile.
Yeah.
He is the one-eyed prophet. He looks at the technology and he sees only what it can do. He sees the upside, the efficiency, the storage capacity, the scale.
He's focused on what it adds?
Only on what it adds. But King Thummus, he's not so easily impressed. He's a systems thinker, too. He counters Thuth. He says, "O most ingenious Booth, you are the father of writing, and your affection for your offspring has led you to attribute to it a quality the exact opposite of what it really possesses."
That's a sharp rebuke.
It is. And then Thummus says that writing will actually create forgetfulness.
Which is so counterintuitive. How could an aid to memory create forgetfulness?
Thummus argues that people will stop using their internal memory because they can now rely on these external signs. They won't remember things themselves. They'll just have a way of being reminded. They'll outsource the faculty of memory.
That hits a little too close to home. I genuinely cannot remember my own brother's phone number anymore.
None of us can.
My phone remembers it for me, so I don't have to. The muscle has atrophied.
Exactly. But Thummus goes even deeper. He doesn't just stop at memory. He says writing will create the conceit of wisdom, the illusion of knowledge.
How so?
He says people will have access to a massive amount of information without proper instruction on how to interpret it. They'll be able to recite facts, but they won't understand the context or the meaning behind them. They will be hearers of many things and will have learned nothing.
They will appear to be omniscient and will generally know nothing. They will be tiresome company, having the show of wisdom without the reality.
It honestly sounds like he's describing a Twitter thread or a Wikipedia binge.
It really does. It's the fundamental difference between information and knowledge, or even information and wisdom.
But the crucial point Postman makes here isn't that Thummus was 100% right and that writing is bad. I mean, obviously Postman wrote a book. He's not anti-writing.
Of course.
The point is the dialectic. The point is that Thummus saw something that Thuth, the inventor, was blind to. Postman calls this the Faustian bargain of all technology.
Right. It giveth and it taketh away.
Always. Every new technology is both a burden and a blessing. It's not either or, it's this and that. It solves old problems while creating new ones.
And Thummus represents that skeptical eye, the one that asks the hard questions.
Yes. Postman calls it Thamusian skepticism. He argues that we are surrounded by modern-day Thuths, by one-eyed prophets, the technophiles who see only what technology adds. They see the convenience, the speed, the connectivity, the economic growth.
If they're blind to the other side of the ledger.
Completely. And we desperately need to be like Thummus. We need to ask of every new technology, from AI to genetic engineering, what does this undo? What does it subtract from our lives? What habits of mind does it erode? What social structures does it make obsolete?
He uses this fantastic and I think really poignant example from Sigmund Freud to illustrate this trade-off. It's from Civilization and its discontents.
It's a classic example, and it's so powerful. Freud is marveling at the technologies of his day, like the telephone.
Right.
He says, essentially, look, the telephone is a miracle. It's an extraordinary conquest of space. It lets me hear the voice of my beloved child who is hundreds of miles away. I should be deeply grateful for this.
But there's always a but.
But Freud says, if there had been no railway to conquer distances, my child would never have left his native town in the first place, and I should not need a telephone to hear his voice.
Wow. That is such a heavy realization when you sit with it.
It's devastating.
We invent the car and the train, which allow for and even encourage the scattering of our families and the destruction of the local walkable village structure.
We atomize ourselves.
And then we invent the telephone, and later FaceTime, to solve the new problem of distance and loneliness that we ourselves created with the previous technology. But the connection on the phone is thinner, it's disembodied, it's not the same.
It's the paradox of progress. We create a technology to solve a problem that was, in many cases, caused by a previous technology. And in that process, the very texture of human interaction and community is fundamentally altered.
Okay, so using this framework, this idea that technology isn't just a tool, but a force that actively reshapes the structure of a culture. Postman lays out a taxonomy. It's a historical model. He divides human history into three types of cultures based on their relationship with tools.
Yes, he gives us tool-using cultures, technocracies, and finally, technopolies.
And this taxonomy is brilliant because it's not deterministic. It helps us see that our current situation wasn't inevitable. It's a specific historical development with specific causes.
It allows us to diagnose where we are by showing us where we came from.
Let's start with the first stage, tool-using cultures. This covers what most of human history, right?
Pretty much all of it, up until about the 17th century in the West. Now, the name tool-using can be a bit misleading. It doesn't mean they had primitive or unsophisticated tools.
Not at all.
They had windmills to grind corn, they had complex irrigation systems, they had the wheel, they had metallurgy, they built the pyramids and Chartres Cathedral. These were incredible engineering marvels.
But the relationship with the tools was fundamentally different.
Completely different. In a tool-using culture, Postman says tools serve two main purposes. First, to solve specific urgent physical problems, like getting water out of a mine or plowing a field.
And second,
And second, to serve the symbolic world of the culture. To serve art, politics, and especially religion. Think of the tools needed to build a great temple or a cathedral. The technology served the theology.
the key here really seems to be that word service. The tools are servants to the culture.
Correct. The tools are integrated into the culture, but they do not rule the culture. Crucially, they are subject to the jurisdiction of a higher authority, usually religion, tradition, or social custom. The culture has an overarching ideology, a narrative about what life is for, that is stronger than the logic of any single technology.
Postman uses the example of the samurai sword, which I just thought was such a powerful image.
It's a perfect example of cultural restraint. The samurai sword, the katana, is a masterpiece of technology. Metallurgically, it is sharper, stronger, more perfectly balanced than almost anything else from that era. As a tool designed for killing, it is brutally efficient.
But you couldn't just, run around hacking people to bits because you had a cool, efficient sword?
Absolutely not. The use of that sword was meticulously governed by Bushido, the way of the warrior. This complex code of honor and ethics dictated when the sword could be drawn, how it could be used, and against whom. The tool was lethal, but the culture contained it. The social system was stronger than the steel.
The why was more important than the how.
That's it. Or take the example from medieval Europe of Pope Innocent II banning the crossbow.
Right, in the 12th century.
The crossbow was a terrifying invention for its time because it democratized death on the battlefield. It allowed a common peasant with maybe a week of training to kill a nobleman, a knight in full armor who had spent his entire life training for war.
It threatened the whole social and military hierarchy.
It was a destabilizing force. So the Pope steps in and at the Second Lateran Council declares the crossbow hateful to God and unfit for Christians.
He bans it.
He bans its use against other Christians. Now, of course, that ban didn't hold forever. War is a powerful motivator for technological adoption. But the fact that he could even issue such a ban, and that it was taken seriously for a time, shows you where the power lay. Theology had jurisdiction over military technology.
The culture had an immune system that could, at least for a while, reject a technology it deemed harmful to its core values.
A very strong immune system.
So what happens when that containment field breaks? That brings us to the second stage, technocracy.
Yes. Technocracy is the stage where the tools start to get loose. They begin to play a much more central role in the thought world of the culture. They're not just servants anymore. They start to attack the culture. They bid to become the culture.
And this is the era we associate with the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution. Postman points to three specific inventions that acted as the battering rams for this massive shift.
The mechanical clock, the printing press, and the telescope.
The holy trinity of technocracy.
You could say that, yeah.
Let's really dig into the clock. Because we look at a clock on the wall and we just think, oh, it tells time. But Postman argues it did something much, much more profound to the human psyche and to the structure of society.
The clock is the ultimate example of a technology with unforeseen, radical consequences. It was invented, ironically, by Benedictine monks in the 12th and 13th centuries.
Why monks?
Because they needed to pray at very specific, regular intervals. They had 7 periods of devotion throughout the day. They wanted to serve God with rigorous regularity. The clock was a tool for piety.
So it starts as a religious tool, just like in a tool-using culture?
Originally, yes.
Mm.
But the logic of the clock has a life of its own. Once you can measure time in repeatable, mechanical, abstract units, in minutes and seconds, you dissociate time from human events and natural rhythms.
What do you mean by that?
Well, before the clock, you worked from sunrise to sunset. You ate when you were hungry. You met your neighbor when the cows came home. Time was organic, tied to the sun, the seasons, the body.
With the clock, time becomes a mathematical abstraction, an empty container to be filled.
And that abstraction, that container, allowed for the synchronization of labor. You cannot have industrial capitalism without the clock. You can't have the concept time is money if you can't measure time down to the minute.
So the monks, in their attempt to be more pious and serve God more precisely,
They inadvertently laid the foundation for the industrial factory and the rise of the merchant class. The clock moved Western civilization from God's time to merchant's time. The tool escaped its original purpose and remade the world in its own image.
that is a massive, massive shift in perception. And then you have the printing press with movable type.
Invented by Gutenberg around 1440, the press, first and foremost, attacked the oral tradition, but more importantly, it attacked the centralized authority of the Catholic Church.
Because before the press, truth was mediated.
It was. Truth came from the priest. He was the one who could read the Latin manuscript, and he interpreted it for you, the illiterate parishioner. Knowledge was hierarchical and communal.
But with the press, suddenly Martin Luther's 95 Theses are on everyone's kitchen table. The Bible is translated into the vernacular.
Exactly. The press created a new definition of intelligence, one based on private, silent reading and individual critical analysis. It fostered the modern idea of the individual. I can read this for myself. I can judge the truth for myself. That is a political and theological earthquake for a hierarchical society,
It shattered the information monopoly of the church.
and paved the way for the Reformation, modern science, and the nation-state. A tool, again, with consequences far beyond its inventor's imagination.
And finally, the telescope. This one seems almost the most existential in its impact.
I think it was. The telescope, in the hands of Galileo, attacked theology directly. It provided empirical proof that the Earth was not the center of the universe.
Which today sounds like a simple astronomy fact, but at the time, it completely destroyed the moral geography of the medieval world.
Absolutely. It moved Western consciousness from a world of moral centrality, where humanity is at the center of creation, God is watching us from above, and we are the main character in a divine drama,
To what?
to a world where we are just lonely wanderers on an obscure rock, in an unremarkable solar system, in a forgotten corner of an incomprehensibly vast and indifferent universe. It induced a kind of cosmic anxiety that I would argue we still feel today.
So in a technocracy, which Postman places roughly from the 17th century through the 19th, these powerful tools are actively reshaping how we see ourselves in our world, but the old world hasn't vanished completely, right?
No, and that is the absolute crucial distinction between a technocracy and a technopoly. In a technocracy, the two worldviews coexist in a state of tension. It's a battle.
A battleground.
Yes. You have the new worldview of progress, science, efficiency, and rationality on one hand. But on the other hand, you still have strong, vibrant traditions, religion, and social customs fighting back, trying to maintain their relevance and authority.
So the cultural immune system is weakened, but it's not dead.
It's not dead, it's fighting. Postman uses Mark Twain as the perfect symbol of this contradictory era. Twain was a total gadget freak. He was one of the first writers to buy and use a typewriter. He lost a fortune investing in a failed typesetting machine. He loved steam engines and patenting inventions.
He was a technophile,
In many ways, yes. But he also wrote Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
which is this deeply spiritual, profoundly humanistic book about dignity, freedom, and the rejection of so-called civilizing norms and technologies.
Right. Twain could hold both of those ideas in his head at the same time. He could praise the efficiency of the cotton mill and also mourn the loss of the river's mystery and spiritual power.
In a technocracy, culture is at war with itself. The new technological worldview humbles tradition, but it hasn't yet destroyed it.
Until it does. And that brings us to the third and final stage, the surrender, technopoly.
Technopoly is, in Postman's words, totalitarian technocracy. This is the stage where the cultural immune system is finally and completely destroyed. The tension snaps, the war is over, and technology has won.
What does that victory look like? It looks like a world where technology eliminates all alternatives, often by making them seem invisible or irrelevant. Technology doesn't just attack the culture anymore, it redefines culture. It redefines religion, art, family, politics, history, truth, and privacy, so that they all fit the requirements of the machine.
And Postman pinpoints the early 20th century in America as the turning point. He points the finger at one man in particular, or rather, at the ideology that man represents.
Frederick Winslow Taylor.
Scientific management.
Yes. The Principles of Scientific Management, published in 1911. You simply cannot understand the modern world, especially modern corporate and institutional life, without understanding Taylor.
We usually think of him as the guy with the stopwatch, standing over factory workers, timing their every move.
He was that. But his philosophy was so much bigger and so much more insidious. Taylor's entire system was based on one core idea, that human judgment is inherently unreliable because it's plagued by laziness, by ambiguity, by emotion, by subjectivity. Therefore, human judgment must be systematically replaced by measurement, by calculation, by procedures, by expert design systems.
So the skilled worker on the factory floor no longer gets to decide the best way to shovel coal based on his years of experience.
No. Taylor did the math. He ran experiments. He determined the one best way to shovel coal, the exact weight of the shovel, the precise arc of the swing, the number of rest periods. The worker is stripped of his autonomy and his craft knowledge. He becomes a mere component in a process designed by an expert.
The system does the thinking, the human just does the executing.
And Postman's crucial argument is that this Taylorist logic did not stay in the factory. It escaped. It colonized our schools, our hospitals, our kitchens, our government, our politics, our bedrooms.
We started asking Taylor's questions about everything.
Yes. What is the most efficient way to raise a child? What is the most scientifically managed way to teach a class? What is the optimal algorithm for finding a romantic partner?
We replaced the fundamental question, is this good? Is this just? Is this beautiful? With the single question, is this efficient?
That is the surrender. In a technopoly, efficiency is not just a means to an end. Efficiency is the end. It is the ultimate social good. If something is efficient, it is righteous. If it is inefficient, it is sinful. And there's no higher court of appeal.
And this structural shift creates a completely new kind of environment. Postman has a whole chapter on what he calls the information glut.
This is one of his most prescient insights, I think, because we live in a culture that fundamentally assumes information is a pure good. We think if we just had more data, we could solve poverty. If we just had more information, we could fix the climate. We have an information scarcity mindset.
But Postman says the problem in a technopoly isn't a lack of information. It's the exact opposite. It's a lack of filters.
It's information chaos. He argues that in a healthy, pre-technopolistic culture like a tool-using culture, the major social institutions function as a kind of cultural immune system.
What do you mean by that?
The school, the court of law, the family, the political party, the religion, they all act as gatekeepers of information. They have a theory about the world. They tell you what information is relevant and what is irrelevant. They help you sort the signal from the noise.
Like a university curriculum, it's essentially a filter. It says, of the millions of books that have been written, read these 50. Ignore the rest for now. This is what it means to be educated in this field.
Exactly. But in Technopoly, those institutions lose their authority. They can no longer provide a coherent, overarching narrative. The filters are blown out. And as a result, we are drowning in information.
He calls it cultural AIDS.
A provocative term, for sure. Anti-information deficiency syndrome. We have lost the ability to defend ourselves against the intrusion of irrelevant, decontextualized, impotent information.
He describes it as the peekaboo world, a phrase he coined in his earlier book, Amusing Ourselves to Death.
Yes, a world where events and facts pop into view for a moment and then vanish without a trace. Information without meaning, without context, without consequence. It's trivial pursuit culture.
We know that a celebrity did something scandalous, and that the stock market is up 50 points, and that a bizarre crime happened in Florida and there was an earthquake in Chile.
But we have no narrative to connect these things. They are just a stream of disconnected data points that demand our attention for a second and then are replaced by the next thing.
And this creates a profound sense of helplessness, doesn't it? If you have no narrative, no filter, you have no way to assign value, you don't know what matters, everything and nothing is important at the same time.
Which is the perfect environment for a system that wants to manage you through technical means.
Okay, so Postman doesn't just leave us with this vague feeling of anxiety and information overload. He actually maps out the system. He shows us the specific mechanisms that Technopoly uses to maintain control and order amidst all this chaos.
It does. He identifies three main pillars of control: bureaucracy, the expert, and what he calls technical machinery.
Let's break down bureaucracy first. We usually just think of it as red tape and, long lines at the DMV. Frustrating, but not necessarily sinister.
But structurally, bureaucracy is a technology. It's a method for processing people and information. And in a technopoly, the bureaucracy becomes autonomous. Its primary goal becomes its own efficiency and perpetuity.
The human purpose it was designed to serve gets lost.
It gets subordinated to the needs of the system. And this is where Postman brings up the Eichmann metaphor. And I think we need to be very careful but very clear about why he uses such a charged example.
Of course.
He's not saying every bureaucrat is a Nazi. He's using Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi bureaucrat who organized the transportation for the Holocaust, as an extreme example of a certain mindset. When Eichmann was on trial in Jerusalem, his defense was not that he hated Jews.
No, his defense was that he was a good bureaucrat.
Exactly. He argued that he wasn't responsible for the ultimate destination of the trains. He was only responsible for the efficiency of the schedule, for making sure the trains ran on time.
I have no responsibility. I'm only responsible for the efficiency of my part.
That is the bureaucrat's creed in a technopoly. It's a powerful mechanism for separating a technical act from its human and moral consequences.
And we see this today in much less violent, but still deeply systemic and harmful ways. When a health insurance algorithm denies a claim for a life-saving surgery, and the person on the phone says,
"I'm so sorry, the system rejected it. My hands are tied. There's nothing I can do."
right,
The moral dimension is completely stripped away, leaving only the technical dimension. The person on the phone isn't making a moral choice to deny care. They're just correctly administering a technical protocol. The system is designed to absolve everyone within it of personal responsibility.
this removal of responsibility, this complexity, it creates a massive demand for someone to tell us what to do, someone to manage the machine. Which brings us to your second pillar, the expert.
The expert. Now, we have to be really clear to distinguish the technopoly expert from the wise man or wise woman of a traditional culture.
How are they different?
A wise person, in the old sense, had broad life experience. They understood human nature, history, ethics, theology. Their wisdom was integrated. The technopoly expert is the opposite.
Oh, specialists.
A hyper-specialist. He knows a tremendous amount out of very, very little. But here's the trick, the sleight of hand. In technopoly, these technical experts claim dominion over non-technical, deeply human areas of life.
So we get experts in child rearing, experts in love and relationships, experts in wellness and happiness.
We have systematically turned the art of living into a series of technical problems that require technical solutions provided by certified experts. We don't trust our own instincts as parents anymore. We need a sleep consultant with a spreadsheet to tell us how to put our own baby to bed.
Or we need a relationship coach with a proprietary 5-step system to tell us how to talk to our spouse.
It creates a state of what you could call learned helplessness. We come to believe that because we don't have the specialized data, we don't have the right to an opinion or a judgment, even about our own lives.
It totally invalidates tradition and common sense. If your grandmother tells you how she raised her kids, that's just an anecdote.
It's unscientific. But if a PhD at a university writes a book based on a study of 50 college sophomores filling out a questionnaire, that's science. That's expertise we should pay for.
And this deep-seated reliance on what looks like science, on measurement and data, leads directly to the third mechanism, technical machinery. And this is where we start reifying abstract concepts.
Reification is a key concept here. It's a fancy word for a simple and dangerous idea. It means taking an abstract concept, something that exists only in our minds, like love or justice, and treating it as if it were a concrete physical thing that can be precisely measured.
Like intelligence.
Intelligence is the perfect example. Intelligence is a complex, multifaceted, and mysterious quality of the human mind. It's a mix of creativity, memory, reasoning, social skills, emotional acuity, adaptability. It's a huge concept.
But in Technopoly, that's too messy. We want to measure it.
So we create a test, a machine for measuring. And that machine spits out a number, an IQ score, a single tidy number.
And then we make the crucial error. We start acting like the number is the intelligence. We say he has an IQ of 130, as if it's a physical trait he possesses, like blue eyes or being 6 feet tall.
We confuse the measure with the reality it purports to represent. And once we do that, we can sort people, rank them, and manage them based on the number. The machinery of testing redefines the human quality in its own image.
Postman tells this absolutely incredible story about a machine called the Haygoth. It's one of the funniest and, at the same time, scariest parts of the book.
The Haygoth. It's amazing. It sounds like a prop from a bad 1980s sci-fi movie.
What was it?
It was sold in the 1980s as a portable, affordable lie detector. It was a little box you could hook up to your telephone, and it supposedly measured the stress content in the other person's voice.
Based on what? Microtremors.
Something like that. It had 16 little lights. If the lights were green, that meant low stress, which the Haygoth machine's manual defined as truth. If the lights were red, that meant high stress, which Haygoth defined as lying.
This is insane. So if I'm an honest but nervous person telling my boss the truth about a mistake I made, my voice is full of stress, the red lights go off, and the machine declares me a liar.
Correct. But if you're a cool as a cucumber sociopath who can lie without a single flutter in your heartbeat, you're getting all green lights. You're truthful.
It's completely absurd.
Of course it is. But the terrifying thing isn't that this ridiculous machine existed. The terrifying thing is that people bought it. Corporations bought it to screen job applicants. People bought it to check on their spouses. They believed that a cheap electronic gadget could discern truth better than a human being listening with empathy and intuition.
It's a form of technological magic. We trust the output no matter how nonsensical because it comes from a machine. It eliminates the difficult, ambiguous work of human judgment and replaces it with a simple, certain binary red or green light.
It's the profound desire for certainty in a complex world. Technopoly promises us that if we just measure enough things with enough precision, we can eliminate uncertainty and ambiguity from the human condition.
And this obsession with machinery and measurement has massive, real-world implications for how we live today. Postman dedicates significant time to breaking down the impact on medical technology and computer technology. And I want to spend some real time here because this is where his critique really, as you said earlier, hits home for most of us.
Let's definitely look at medicine. Postman argues that we have undergone a fundamental shift in the doctor-patient relationship, and that shift has been mediated entirely by technology.
It starts, he says, with a very simple tool, the stethoscope.
It does. Before the stethoscope was invented in the early 19th century, a doctor's primary diagnostic tool was listening to the patient's story. Where does it hurt? How do you feel? Tell me what's going on. The patient's subjective experience, their narrative, was the primary source of evidence.
But once you have the stethoscope, and then later the X-ray, and then the blood test, the EKG, the CATs, the MRI.
The focus shifts dramatically. The doctor is no longer looking primarily at you, the patient. The doctor is looking at the data about you that is generated by the machines. The patient becomes an object of study, a collection of data points.
And Postman points out, even back in the early 90s, that American doctors perform far more surgeries and diagnostic tests than their counterparts in Europe or Canada.
Yes, and that gap has only widened since he wrote the book. The incentive structure of the healthcare system, the billing logic, certainly pushes for more tests and procedures. But it's not just about greed, it's also about ideology.
What's the ideology?
The ideology is that nature is a flawed, inefficient enemy to be subdued by aggressive technological intervention, and that more technology, more data, always equals better care.
I've experienced this personally. I think many people have. You go to a doctor, you say, I'm in pain right here. They run a scan. The scan comes back negative. And they look at you as if to say, well, the machine says you're fine, so I guess you're not really in pain.
That is the essence of Technopoly in the exam room. The machine's reality is privileged over the human reality. Your subjective experience of pain is devalued because it's subjective and therefore suspect. The scan is objective and therefore true. We have lost the cultural capacity to validate human experience unless it can be backed up by a metric.
It turns the patient into a collection of organs to be fixed rather than a whole person to be healed.
Exactly. And then there's computer technology. For Postman, the computer is the ultimate technology of Technopoly. It's more than just a tool. It is a dominant metaphor that is actively redefining what it means to be human.
We talk about ourselves using computer language all the time. I need to process that information. My brain is just hardwired that way. I just don't have the bandwidth for this right now.
We have come to see the human mind as if it were just a slower, wetter, less efficient computer. We view the act of thinking as information processing. But thinking is so much more than that. Thinking involves feeling, intuition, metaphor, history, morality. Computers don't do any of that. Computers calculate.
But because we have internalized this metaphor of the computer as a superior kind of brain, we start to suffer from what the social psychologist Stanley Milgram called an agentic shift.
This is a crucial point. We transfer responsibility for our actions and decisions to the machine. We stop seeing the computer as a tool we use and start seeing it as an autonomous agent.
We say the computer calculated the results. Rather than the more accurate, we use the computer to calculate the result.
Or the algorithm fired you. The computer says no.
It's a linguistic trick that absolves us.
It allows us to wash our hands of the decision. It creates a profound loss of what Postman calls technological modesty. We start to believe that because a computer can do something like rank teachers based on student test scores or decide who gets a loan, it therefore should. The question of wisdom is never asked.
This connects so directly to the rise of generative AI today. We have AI that can write poems, create art, compose music, and the Technopoly logic is immediate and overwhelming. Well, it can do it faster and cheaper, so we should let it.
Yes, the efficiency argument.
We rarely stop to ask the amusing question, is the act of writing a poem something we want to outsource? Is the human struggle of creation the whole point? What do we lose when we cede that ground?
Exactly. In Technopoly, the struggle is just inefficiency. And inefficiency is the cardinal sin. It must be eliminated. If a machine can write the email or the legal brief or the eulogy, let it. We progressively hollow out the domains of human experience in the name of convenience and productivity.
And this brings us to what might be the most subtle and powerful part of his argument: the invisible technologies. Because it's not just the hardware, the MRIs, and the laptops that shape us. It's the soft technologies, the intellectual tools.
Yes, things like polling, statistics, management systems, and standardized testing. These are technologies too. They are procedures for organizing reality.
Polling is a massive one, especially in politics. We tend to think of a public opinion poll as a neutral mirror. We think it simply measures and reflects what the public already thinks.
But Postman argues, and I completely agree, that polling does not measure public opinion. It creates it.
How does it do that?
Think about the mechanics of it. A pollster calls you and asks, do you approve of the president's handling of the economy? Yes or no? Now, a real human opinion on the economy is messy. It's something like, well, I think his trade policy is misguided, but I like what he's doing on inflation, though I'm worried about my cousin who lost his job, and I think.
But the form of the technology, the poll, doesn't allow for that complexity. You have to pick a box, yes or no, approve or disapprove.
The technology forces you to collapse a complex, nuanced, often contradictory thought into a single simplistic data point. It constructs a simplified reality that did not exist a moment before. And then the news reports it as fact. 60% of Americans approve of the president's handling of the economy.
And that statistic becomes a fact. It becomes a weapon in political discourse. It influences how politicians act and what they think is possible.
It's a classic feedback loop. The poll creates the appearance of a consensus, which shapes the policy, which then reinforces the opinion measured by the next poll. It commodifies opinion. It turns what should be a reasoned public debate into a daily scoreboard.
And this deep reliance on numbers to settle complex moral or social questions, this is what Postman calls scientism.
Yes, and we need to be very, very clear here. Scientism is not the same thing as science.
That's an important distinction.
Science is a method of inquiry, a beautiful, rigorous, humble way of understanding the natural world. Scientism is a belief system. It is a dogma. It's the desperate and, I think, misguided hope that we can apply the methods of the natural sciences, like physics or chemistry, to the unpredictable messiness of human behavior.
It's the belief that if we just find the right metrics, the right algorithm, we can solve the problem of education, or the problem of crime, or the problem of happiness.
It assumes that human life is a technical problem to be solved, rather than a moral mystery to be lived. So we get sociologists and economists and psychologists trying to find the universal formula for a good society, as if people were molecules in a beaker.
And this connects so deeply to the core theme of this channel, to the crisis in perception. We perceive these numbers, these statistics, these rankings and charts as neutral and objective. We have this cultural belief that the numbers don't lie.
The myth of neutrality. It's a powerful myth.
But they're not neutral at all.
Not in the slightest. As Postman says, to a man with a pencil, everything looks like a list. To a man with a camera, everything looks like an image. And to a person with a computer, everything looks like data. No technology is neutral. Every technology has an ideological bias baked into its very structure. It constructs the world in a certain way and makes other ways of seeing the world harder.
And that is how it legitimizes power. That's the really scary part.
It absolutely is. Think about it. If a politician stands up and says, I'm cutting funding to the school music program because I personally believe the arts are a frivolous waste of time, you can argue with him. That's a clear value judgment.
You can stand up and say, I disagree. I believe art is vital for the human soul and a cornerstone of a good education. It's a debate about values.
But if that same politician stands up and says an independent analysis based on a proprietary algorithm has determined that reallocating the music program's budget to STEM initiatives will yield a 4.7% increase in future GDP contribution from this cohort, how do you argue with that?
It's almost impossible.
It hides the moral and political choice behind a shimmering wall of technical objectivity. It shuts down the debate. It makes the decision seem inevitable, rational, and beyond question.
It makes the system immune to moral criticism. Because to critique it effectively, you have to use the language of the system itself. You have to come back with your own charts, your own data, your own algorithm. You can't just stand up and say, but this is wrong for our children.
Exactly. We become trapped in the machine's logic. We're forced to speak its language, and in doing so, we validate its authority.
So, after all this, I mean, where does this leave us? The diagnosis is pretty grim. We've surrendered our culture to the logic of technology. We have, as he says, drained our great symbols of their meaning.
The great symbol drain, that's another key concept for him in the final chapters. In a technopoly, commercial efficiency and constant novelty are the highest goals. So we take our most powerful sacred symbols, the American flag, the Christian cross, the image of a revolutionary hero like Che Guevara, and we use them to sell products.
We put the flag on a beer can. We use a sacred hymn to sell a car.
And the result is that the symbols are trivialized. They are drained of their power to bind us together, to give us a shared sense of purpose and meaning. We're left with no coherent, overarching story to tell us who we are or why we are here. We only have the story of efficiency. We have an abundance of how, but we have no why.
But Postman, to his credit, he doesn't just throw up his hands and say, game over. He doesn't leave us in despair. He does offer a path forward. He talks about becoming a loving resistance fighter.
I love that phrase so much. It's not a call to arms in a violent Luddite sense. It's a call to intellectual and spiritual arms. He asks, how do we live within a technopoly without becoming a hollowed-out product of it?
So what does a loving resistance fighter look like in practice? What do they do?
A resistance fighter is, first and foremost, someone who works to maintain what he calls epistemological distance. They stand a little bit apart from their tools. They don't let their technologies define their worldview.
So they don't smash the computer, but they also don't worship at its altar.
Precisely. They use the technology, but they consciously and consistently refuse to accept the ideology of the technology. They refuse to accept efficiency as the highest aim of human life. They believe some things should be beautifully inefficient.
They pay no attention to a poll unless they know exactly what questions were asked, how they were worded, and who paid for it.
Yes. They understand the difference between the sacred and the profane. They know that some areas of life, like education, like love, like family, like grief, are not technical problems to be optimized or solved. They are mysteries to be lived.
They are, in essence, a modern-day King Thamus. They look at the new app, the new AI model, the new smart device, and they always ask the hard question. What will this undo? What beautiful human thing will this make more difficult?
And finally, Postman roots his hope in a particular kind of education. He believes that the only real long-term inoculation against the delusions of technopoly is a deep engagement with history.
Not just social studies, not just names and dates, but the history of knowledge itself.
Yes. He argues that we shouldn't just teach science as a collection of final settled facts. We must teach the history of science, teach the arguments, the wrong turns, the messy debates, teach how we, as a species, struggled our way to the belief that the Earth goes around the sun.
Why is that so important?
Because if you have history, you have context. You understand that knowledge is a human struggle, a messy, ongoing process, not just a set of data points delivered from on high by a machine or an expert.
Yeah.
And more importantly, you know that people lived and thought differently in the past, which proves that we could live and think differently in the future.
It breaks the spell of inevitability.
Exactly. History gives you a place to stand outside the machine. It gives you a narrative that is richer, deeper, and stronger than the thin, sterile narrative of efficiency.
This book, Technopoly, it really forces you to look at the world differently. It gives you a new lens. It's not about hating technology. It's about power. It's about asking over and over, who is in charge here? Is it the culture using the tool for its own purposes, or is the tool using the culture for its purposes?
And that is the question we all have to answer every single day in the small and large choices we make about how we live our lives. When you pick up your phone, when you engage with an algorithm, are you using it or is it using you?
Neil Postman gave us the language and the framework to ask that question with clarity and courage. And for that, I think he is utterly indispensable.
I couldn't agree more.
We strongly encourage you to read Technopoly. Borrow it from a library. If you can, try to find a physical copy, read it on paper, feel the weight of it in your hands.
Maintain that epistemological distance.
Exactly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.